Most people have no idea that the most sophisticated nutritional system ever documented wasn't invented last year by a cardiologist. It wasn't discovered in a laboratory or published in a peer-reviewed journal in the last decade. It was written down thousands of years ago. The biblical texts don't just tell you how to live. They tell you exactly what to eat. Specific foods, specific combinations, specific preparations that kept ancient populations strong, resilient, and functioning at a level that would embarrass most modern diets. Stay with us, because meal number 7 combines 2 ingredients that cancer researchers are now studying specifically for their synergistic anti-tumor effect. And the final revelation, number 12, comes directly from a passage in Ezekiel where the prophet identifies 8 ingredients by name. Nutritional scientists have since analyzed them together and found something almost impossible to explain as coincidence. 12 meals. Thousands of years of wisdom. Before we continue, if knowing this matters to you, subscribe. This channel covers the things hiding in plain sight that most people walk right past. We're on a journey to hit 1,000 subscribers this month, and every person who joins makes the next video possible. Also, tell me in the comment where you are watching from. Tell me below. Let's get into it. In a world grappling with chronic inflammation, metabolic collapse, and a gut health crisis that now affects more than half the global population, we keep looking in the wrong direction. Expensive supplements, elimination diets, pharmaceutical interventions with side effect profiles longer than the conditions they treat. But what if the answer wasn't new at all? What if our ancestors possessed a nutritional blueprint so precisely calibrated to the human body that we are only now, with modern biochemistry, beginning to understand why it worked? The ancient Near East was not a place of abundance. It was a place of heat, hard labor, scarce water, and survival pressure. The people who thrived in that environment didn't thrive by accident. They built an eating culture around specific foods that appeared again and again across the biblical record. Not as background detail, but as deliberate instruction. Wheat and barley, figs and pomegranates, olive oil and raw honey, lentils, garlic, bitter herbs, dates, fish from the Sea of Galilee, and a fermented grain bread that modern gastroenterologists are now studying with genuine urgency. These weren't incidental ingredients. They were a system. Today we examine all 12. Meal 1, Ezekiel's bread. The fermented foundation. In Ezekiel 4 verse 9, the prophet receives a precise recipe. Wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. Ground together. Fermented. Baked. This wasn't symbolic. This was survival nutrition engineered for a siege. Designed to sustain a man through extended physical and mental hardship with a minimum of ingredients. Modern nutritional analysis of this exact combination reveals complete amino acid coverage, meaning the protein profile across these 6 grains and legumes together supplies every essential amino acid the human body cannot produce on its own. The fermentation process, which in ancient bread making happened naturally over days, breaks down phytic acid, the compound that blocks mineral absorption in unfermented grains. The result is a bread whose iron, zinc, and magnesium become dramatically more bioavailable than anything produced by modern rapid rise methods. Ezekiel didn't have a biochemist. He had a directive and a recipe that modern science keeps confirming was correct. Meal 2, lentil stew. The birthright bowl. Genesis 25. Jacob's red lentil stew was significant enough to trade a birthright for. Lentils are among the most nutrient-dense legumes ever cultivated, high in folate, iron, and slow-release complex carbohydrates that produce none of the glucose spike associated with refined modern starches. They contain polyphenol with documented anti-inflammatory activity. A 2022 meta-analysis in Nutrients Journal found regular legume consumption associated with significantly reduced markers of systemic inflammation across multiple population groups. In the ancient Near East, lentil stew was daily medicine disguised as lunch. Meal 3, olive oil and bitter herbs. The Passover protocol. The Passover meal was not assembled casually. Bitter herbs, typically identified as wild lettuce, endive, or horseradish, were paired with olive oil and unleavened bread in a meal designed to be eaten standing, in haste, by people preparing for physical exertion. Extra virgin olive oil contains oleocanthal, a compound whose anti-inflammatory mechanism so closely mirrors ibuprofen that researchers at the Monell Chemical Senses Center described it as a natural anti-inflammatory drug. The bitter herbs contain sesquiterpene lactones, the same class of compound now being studied for their activity against drug-resistant bacterial strains. Together, they form an anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial meal protocol that predates the pharmaceutical industry by 3,000 years. Meal 4. Pomegranate. The temple fruit. King Solomon's temple had 200 carved pomegranates on its pillars. This was not decoration. In a culture that encoded meaning into architecture, the pomegranate was a statement about what mattered. It contains punicalagins, elagitannins found almost nowhere else in the plant kingdom, which gut bacteria convert into urolithin A, a compound now being studied in clinical trials for its effect on mitochondrial function and muscle preservation in aging populations. Early results are compelling enough that urolithin A supplements are now sold at premium prices in health stores worldwide. The fruit was free. It grew on the walls. Meal 5. Raw honey and locusts. John's desert diet. John the Baptist survived the Judean desert on honey and locusts. This reads as austerity. The biochemistry reads differently. Raw, unfiltered honey, not the processed supermarket product, contains hydrogen peroxide-producing enzymes, B-defensin, 1, and methylglyoxal, all with documented antimicrobial activity. It was used as wound dressing in field medicine for centuries because it works. Locusts are approximately 60% protein by dry weight, rich in zinc, iron, and B12, and contain chitin, a prebiotic fiber now being researched for its effect on gut microbiome diversity. John was not suffering. John was optimizing. Meal 6. Figs. The prophet's poultice. In 2 Kings 20, the prophet Isaiah instructs that a compress of figs be placed on King Hezekiah's infected wound. The king recovers. Figs contain phycin, a proteolytic enzyme, alongside significant concentrations of polyphenol and psoralen compounds with measurable antimicrobial activity in laboratory studies. Fresh fig latex has demonstrated inhibitory activity against Staphylococcus aureus in peer-reviewed research. Isaiah did not prescribe antibiotics. He prescribed the closest available equivalent. Eat them fresh when in season. Dried figs retain their polyphenol content, but lose the active enzyme fraction. The difference matters. Meal 7. Garlic and onion. The Egyptian staple the Israelites craved. Numbers 11:5. The Israelites in the wilderness weep for the garlic and onions they ate in Egypt. They are walking toward the promised land, and they are grieving garlic. This tells you something about how central it was to their daily function. When garlic is crushed or chopped, the enzyme alliinase converts alliin into allicin almost instantly, a compound active against a broad spectrum of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Multiple clinical trials have confirmed that regular garlic consumption reduces the frequency and duration of upper respiratory infections. Onions contribute quercetin, one of the most studied flavonoids in cardiovascular research. Pair them together, cooked low and slow in olive oil, and you have a cardiovascular and immune support base that most kitchens in the ancient Near East used daily without knowing why it worked. They just knew that it did. Meal 8. Barley. The soldier's grain. Roman legionary soldiers were called hordearii, barley men. They were not fed barley as punishment. They were fed barley because it worked. Barley contains beta-glucan, a soluble fiber with the most consistent cholesterol-lowering evidence of any dietary compound in current nutritional science. The European Food Safety Authority has approved a specific health claim for barley beta-glucan and blood cholesterol reduction. One of the few times a food component has met that regulatory threshold. Biblical barley bread was dense, slow digesting, and blood sugar stable. It sustained armies. It fed prophets. It is now being rebranded as a functional food by nutritional supplement companies and sold back to us at considerable markup. Cook it as a whole grain. Keep it simple. The processing is where the benefit disappears. Meal 9. Dates. The desert's fast release. The date palm is mentioned more than any other fruit tree in biblical literature. In a desert environment where caloric density and rapid energy availability were survival variables, dates were engineering. They are approximately 70% natural sugar, primarily glucose and fructose in a ratio the body processes efficiently, combined with potassium, magnesium, and a fiber matrix that moderates the absorption curve. Clinical research from Jordan University of Science and Technology found that women who consumed dates regularly in the final weeks of pregnancy experienced significantly faster and less complicated deliveries, associated with the fruit's oxytocin-sensitizing compounds. They are portable. They do not spoil quickly. They sustained desert travel for millennia. Meal 10, fish from Galilee. The resurrection breakfast. After the resurrection, in John 21, Jesus prepares a breakfast of fish and bread over coals on the shore. This is the first meal described after the most significant event in Christian theology. It is grilled fish and bread. The fish of the Sea of Galilee, primarily tilapia and sardine species, are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA. These are the compounds most consistently linked to reduced neuroinflammation, improved cognitive function, and cardiovascular protection in modern clinical literature. The brain is approximately 60% fat. The specific fats in cold and warm freshwater fish are among the most bioavailable sources of the building blocks it requires. A breakfast of fish and bread over an open fire is a complete, anti-inflammatory, neurologically supportive meal. It requires no supplements. It requires a fire and a net. Meal 11, bitter herb salad. The forgotten green. The herbs of the Passover table, wild endive, chicory, dandelion greens, horseradish, are not ceremonial accessories. They are among the most nutrient-dense leafy greens available in the ancient Mediterranean diet. Dandelion greens contain more beta-carotene than carrots and more calcium per gram than milk. Chicory contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species in the gut. Horseradish contains sinigrin, a glucosinolate with documented anti-cancer activity in laboratory studies. Dress them with olive oil and a squeeze of lemon. That combination, fat-soluble nutrients made bioavailable by the oil, vitamin C from the lemon enhancing iron absorption, is nutritional precision that no one needed a PhD to discover. Meal 12, the Ezekiel grain bowl. The complete system. Return to Ezekiel. Take the bread recipe, wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, spelt, and instead of baking it, build it as a grain bowl. Add bitter herbs. Dress with cold-pressed olive oil. Place pomegranate seeds across the top. Add a handful of dates on the side. A piece of grilled fish. You have now assembled in one bowl complete protein, anti-inflammatory phenols, prebiotic fiber, cardiovascular protective beta-glucan, urolithin A precursors, oleocanthal, omega-3 fatty acids, and a glucose-stabilizing fiber matrix. Nutritional scientists who have analyzed this combination found something almost impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Every major system the human body runs on is addressed. Immune function, cardiovascular health, gut diversity, neurological support, metabolic stability. Ezekiel wrote it down in 593 BC. A necessary note before you close this video. Nothing here replaces medical advice. If you have a diagnosed condition, a medication protocol, or a clinical concern, speak to your doctor before making significant dietary changes. Several of these foods interact with specific medications. Garlic thins blood. Figs can affect blood sugar in diabetics. Dates are calorie-dense. Start slowly and pay attention to your body. What this video argues is something different from medical prescription. It argues that 3,000 years later, cancer researchers, cardiologists, gut health specialists, and immunologists keep arriving at the same place the biblical writers were already standing. Not because the Bible is a nutrition textbook, but because the people who compiled it were paying extraordinarily close attention to what kept human beings alive and well across generations of hard living. That level of observation, sustained over millennia, is not something to dismiss. Pick one meal from this list. Make it this week. Start with the lentil stew if you want the easiest entry point. Start with Ezekiel's grain bowl if you want the most complete one. Drop in the comments which one you're starting with. If this kind of content matters to you, the things hiding in plain sight that somehow nobody talks about, subscribe. We're building toward 1,000 and every person who joins keeps this going. I read every comment. Tell me which meal you're making first.